Glider Project 2021, Swimmy. The project, to construct a glider to be thrown by hand on April 22nd during a friendly competition. The glider must use no propulsion, must fit within a 16 square inch area, and be made primarily of the balsa wood given at the beginning of class. Creativity and fun encouraged. This concise video report is to be concise. The following will contribute to mission success. The glider will consistently fly over 20 feet of lateral distance. It will be made within specifications, and it will be unique and innovative. Here is an analysis of the design process requirements. The glider must be hand-thrown. Success will be achieved when I have built a craft that can be grasped and thrown easily. The glider must fly further than 20 feet. Success will be achieved when my craft can surpass 20 feet 80% of the time that is thrown. The glider must fit within a 32 square inch area. Success will be achieved when my craft is complete and still fits within the 16 by 16 box. The glider must be ready to perform before April 22nd. Success will be achieved when I have built a craft that fits all other mission criteria and is sturdy enough to survive testing to make it to the fly-off on the 22nd. And now to discuss some design alternatives. We'll start with materials. I seriously considered using cardboard. I ended up doing all of my prototyping in cardboard, but it proved a useful material since it was plentiful, easy to cut, and had more leeway in general with shape. It also is much more ductile than the balsa provided and could take the intense testing process. The trade-off is that cardboard is liable to permanently fold or bend, making it flimsier the more it is used. It also is more likely to warp with the use of adhesive. Ultimately, I chose to use balsa because the requirements called for stability and consistent flight performance. However, I paid the price of my decision as balsa is very brittle and proved too weak to survive rigorous testing. Next, let's discuss dihedral. It's much more difficult to create a balanced and symmetrical plane when adding the design complication of an angle in the wings. During my final design, I stressed design simplicity for the sake of balance. Since my final craft was extremely light, I did not want any minor mistake in manufacturing to affect its performance, and therefore I sacrificed the dihedral. It is of note that my final design has little to no difficulty with roll stability. Next, let's talk about adhesives. For a choice of adhesives, I had a combo of wood glue, super glue, Elmer's glue, and hot glue. I ended up using hot glue because it was a quick set and easy to remove and reconfigure. Since a key aspect to my success was being able to finish or fix my glider quickly, I abandoned the wood glue and super glue for the hot glue, which dried in mere seconds. A little bit about sizing. I knew from the start that I wanted the maximum area for my wings, and that would just be the full single-dimensional allotment of 16 inches. This is because area factors into the lift equation. In my original biplane prototype, the idea was that, because velocity also plays heavily into lift, I would design my glider with sufficient mass to achieve significant momentum when thrown. That is why I designed it with the maximum fuselage dimension. This idea was abandoned after several unsuccessful tests of my heavier biplane prototype and advice from Professor Zadie. The final design is as light as possible and therefore wings have a lot of area, but the fuselage is only long enough to provide sufficient pitch balance with the tail, as well as for longitudinal and yaw stability with the sides. Testing. Testing was largely conducted in the corridor adjacent to the AE makerspace. I also tested a fair amount outside to replicate the flight day conditions. During the testing phase for each iteration, I was sure to have Play-Doh handy so I could adjust stability after observing flight patterns. However, I proved an inconsistent thrower at best, and test results proved difficult to analyze as they seemed to vary widely depending on how I had thrown each design iteration. Another concern was the effect rigorous throwing practice and testing was having on the glider iterations themselves. I ended up spending many hours on repairs and redesigns. Due to concern of possibly breaking my final design, Swimmy, once I placed its center of gravity in the right spot, I did not test it anymore for fear of breaking it. Design iterations. First design was the Hawk. The wings of the Hawk used an extreme elliptical shape and were placed at a high angle of attack. This design was abandoned due to material choice not being suited for the type of the wing involved. Design 2 was the Frisbee. My design process led me to research much about the gyroscopic stability of flying discs. However, the design was ixnayed by the client. Design 3, the biplane. I thought I could get more lift with more wing area, so I researched designs for gliders that were biplanes, and found plenty of results ranging from paper airplanes to large balloon planes. I decided to pursue the design and see for myself how well it would work. This led to many more iterations. These subsequent iterations came about because of the number of times I kept breaking my fuselage and other parts of the plane. I went through a phase of design choices, including only using one wing for the biplane, and then ended up sticking the second wing on. I believe this process of sticking random things on the plane instead of improving my throw technique is one of the flaws in my process. Swimmy's final design incorporates a fish-shaped fuselage with straight wings, an angle of attack of 5 degrees, a horizontal tail at the end, and 2 pennies taped to either side of the nose. The idea behind the fish shape for Swimmy was that it would be placing mass ahead of the wing geometrically, which is easy to grasp and throw, and provides vertical surface area for substantial yaw stability. Balanced Swimmy longitudinally by placing Swimmy upside down and moving the wings toward where they would roughly be to place the center of pressure behind the center of gravity based on previous iterations. Then, after gluing the wings on, I fine-tuned longitudinal stability by taping pennies to either side of Swimmy's nose and adjusting them forward or backwards during testing. When thrown perfectly horizontally, Swimmy's coefficient of lift should be 2 pi times the angle of attack, which is 5 degrees, giving about 0.56. During her qualifying throw, I released Swimmy at a slight downward angle, and I estimate the new angle of attack to be about 1 degree, so her lift coefficient was about 0.12. The induced coefficient of drag was calculated based on this equation, with an efficiency factor of 0.7 for a rectangular wing, and an aspect ratio of 16/3. Using the ideal coefficient of lift, the induced CD would be about 0.03. Using my actual throw, however, the CD was about 0.24. Some final thoughts. With the time constraints, the best thing I could have done to improve my results was to seek help with my throwing technique and perhaps get some coaching from others. This would have made my test data more reliable, and I could have made improvements based more on consistent data. I also could have done a little bit more research into things like efficiency factor and aspect ratio of the wings. This project has opened my eyes to just some of the many complications involved in flight, and I'm looking forward to furthering my study of aerodynamics.